Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today on our weekly webinar, we're going to be talking about how to benchmark end user experience against industry standards. So by ways of introductions, you have myself, Stacy Leidwinger. I'm with the product marketing team here at Goliath. And then we also have Avi Lip, who's one of our technical consultants. So as we wait for people to come on, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we go ahead and jump in. So in terms of agenda today, we're really going to be focusing on what are some of the common use cases that exist when it comes to benchmarking end user experience analytics. We'll then explain why benchmarking is hard. We'll talk through the criteria when you think about picking technology and services to assist you with benchmarking. And finally, we're going to end with a use case and really talk about an organization that went out to benchmark end user experience, the data they used, and how they achieved that. We are going to hold questions till the end, but please submit them throughout in the Q&A or chat box. We do have quite a bit of time reserved to make sure that we answer your questions. And frankly, that's always Avi and my favorite time to really interact with all of you on the line. One question we do always get is, will this recording be available? Yes, within the next 24 hours, you'll have a copy of the recording that you can refer back to or even share with your colleagues. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. One thing that I really wanted to kind of level set before we even jump in is what the topic is today. And that topic is how to benchmark end user experience. And I call that out because it's specifically not talking about how do you report on performance of individual IT elements, which many of you may do today. We're really looking at what is the overall experience from the user's perspective so that you can respond to questions about, are we meeting our service level agreement? How's our IT department performing? Maybe you want a baseline performance before a migration or a major upgrade. You have compliance policies that you need to confirm you're adhering to. Regardless of the tactical use case, what we hear from our clients consistently is they need objective evidence so they can prove beyond a doubt what that end user experience is, regardless of where users are located. So as we go ahead and jump in here, what I'm going to talk about next is, why is it so hard to answer those questions? It's not as easy as maybe your manager or even your business unit expects it to be. And the challenges that exist really come down to two areas. Avi, if you want to go to the next slide. And these two areas really fall under one, the current tools that you have really are only focused on those individual IT elements and looking at their performance, not the overall user experience. And because of that, then you're forced to actually infer what that experience is because all you have are little piece parts of what makes up the experience. On the other hand, you do have Citrix, and as we know, Citrix is a powerful application, but Citrix is not a benchmarking product. It too is only going to provide you performance data that's related to Citrix and its individual component parts, not the overall experience. The other challenge we see, even with some of the newer products put out there, is that the data isn't retained long enough in a usable format that's parsed in a way that allows you to respond to the use cases we just outlined. We heard these challenges over the past several years from our clients, and because of that, we really work together to put together a criteria list. So when you're evaluating, how do I invest in technology that helps me benchmark? These are the things that you need to look for. You need to look for a solution that is solely focused on looking at the end user experience and reporting on metrics from the user's perspective. Those metrics need to be able to respond to, what does their logon process look like? What was performance as they used applications all the way through disconnect? And the information that you're gathering needs to be retained over a long period of time, 30, 60, 90, maybe even a year's worth of information, and then in a usable format. So it can't be rolled up in average. You need to be able to parse it by user, group, location, application, time period. And maybe the most important criteria that we hear time and time again is, I don't want it to take a specialist to collect, correlate, and interpret data. I need to be able to respond and benchmark performance quickly without being an expert. So we took this set of criteria and we put it into our technology and software product. So we at Goliath offer a solution where you don't have to do any of the work. We have IT intelligence and automation that will automatically collect all end user experience data from that user's perspective. We're going to correlate those metrics together and then interpret the information so you don't have to be a Citrix expert. So let me tell you a little bit about how we actually do that and what those results look like. So what we do with that embedded intelligence and automation is that we automatically harvest all the information. So Avi, if you want to go to the next slide. And with that information we harvest, we have out-of-the-box reports that report on what the actual user experience is from their perspective. This is only a sampling, but we can give you details around what's their average latency, what's their logon performance, when are they using Citrix, how are they using Citrix, how active are they in their Citrix session, what's their personal connection speed, and the list goes on. Not only are we providing this data, but we allow organizations and IT pros like yourself to really parse it out in a usable fashion across time period, location, by individual users, by groups, by application. The goal here is to make it usable for you. If you think about your own organization, if your manager came to you today and said, I need to verify that over the last 6 months, we've been meeting our SLAs of logon times of 30 seconds and 10-second reconnects. Could you honestly answer that question? Do you have the data that you would actually back up and say, yes, I have it all readily available for you? Our health IT professionals are asked for that kind of information all of the time. And the reality is you probably don't have it. So if we want to move on to the next slide, what we find out is you may think you have this information, but the reality is you really don't have it. So I'm going to parse it out for you in another example. Let's say that same manager came to you and said, you know what, since our workers have been remote, I've been hearing a lot of complaints around slow session performance, latency, lagging screen times, you name the complaint. You've all been there where the loudest voice in the room is the reality of what performance is. It's not the actual performance from the large majority of your end users. So if your manager comes to you and asks you these questions, either you are the Citrix team or you're going to go to the Citrix team and you're going to start to look at director, maybe Citrix Analytics. And you might find some of the information, but you might not be able to go back and look at it for 6 months. You probably, especially if you're using analytics, can't dig into which users actually had the issues. So you don't know how big of an issue it is if it exists. You might go to the network team and the network team says, no, everything looks great. Look, network speed, bandwidth, everything's performing the way it should be. The server team says, no, all of the servers and all the VMs that we have supporting our Citrix farm, resource utilization looks great. You can look at my performance reports. Everything's wonderful. Storage team says the same thing. But the reality is users are having a problem. But you went and looked at individual IT elements and every IT element looked like it was performing the way it should. This is where Goliath comes in. This is why we developed Goliath, so that you can have the metrics you need to benchmark actual end user experience from the user's perspective, whether they're working from home, whether they're on site, or maybe one of your remote locations. And you can go back over a time period, maybe the last 6 months, to respond to your manager and say, yes, there are several users having a problem. We've isolated who they are, and now we're digging into root cause. Now, with empirical evidence, you can actually explain what that performance is. And in many cases, you're able to bring back to management or your business units that your IT department is performing better than they expected. There were a few noisy users that got their way up to management, but reality is most users aren't having a challenge. Avi, why don't we go ahead and dive into the technology to show a little bit about how these reports come about and what I mean when we say we're reporting from that user perspective. So as Avi brings this up, I'm not going to go down in the laundry list, but I want to point out a few things. One, he's showing you the reports in Goliath. They're fully integrated into our entire platform. So you're not going to some separate console or another product to get access to this data. It's all there in a single console. Also, everything's out of the box. So as soon as you start working with Goliath, we automatically deploy and collect data. So you don't have to go ahead and actually configure how to do any of this. It's all there. Of course, you can configure the reports. You can determine how long or when you want to run them, how you want to share them, either via email or export. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you use the data, but you don't have to do the work to collect it, correlate it, and integrate it. So Avi, do we have the ICA latency report that you could bring up?
We do.
As Avi clicks, all right, thank you. So as Avi clicks into this report, again, this is our demo environment, so you're not going to see maybe a ton of information, but I really did want to call out a few things about how people use our reports for benchmarking. So here, for example, you can see things like ICA latency, network latency, ICA round trip time. Let's talk about network latency, for example. Going back to what we just said, the network team said everything looks great. But reality is maybe for these users, they are experiencing high network latency. What we're providing you is a network latency score that is based on what the user is experiencing because of the bandwidth allocated to Citrix and their behavior. So the network might be working great, but someone could still be having network latency because they don't have enough bandwidth allocated to their Citrix session to use the graphically intense programs or Teams or GoToMeeting that they need to perform their job adequately. I can't tell you how many times I've had client calls come back to us and say, thank you. I have been battling with, name it, network team, storage team, the server team for months now. Here I was able to quickly show them what was going on, and then we were able to go ahead and resolve issues that we were having. Avi, do you want to maybe then go into another report? I'm just going to show up a couple examples. Do we have the end user experience report? This is one of my favorite reports that our users use because it's really showing you in a single report all the key performance indicators you would want, meaning that we're showing logon duration, ICA latency, as well as client speed. And so at a glance, you can quickly identify and start to benchmark how are our logon times? What is our ICA latency? And you can parse this data by time, by group. If you want to go ahead and parse logon times by remote workers, by different remote locations based on your headquarters, you can go ahead and do so. And you can see it at a user level. So when I talk about data being retained and usable, it's meaning that you can actually get to specific facts in a very easy, systematic way. All right, Avi, if you want to bring back the slides. Thank you. So what I want to do just to kind of bring this out a little bit clearer is go into a use case that we were actually working with. One of our clients is a financial planning and investment firm. They're actually in our home state, Avi and I, in Pennsylvania. I'm on the west side, he's on the east side here in Pittsburgh and Philly. But we worked with this organization and they came to us shortly after the pandemic started. And what they said was, we have a surge of remote work. You know, we've had an experience of remote workers. Everyone had typically been in one of our offices. Now they're all at home. So we went from having one location to hundreds of locations. Immediately, we got an increase of complaints around Citrix latency, slow logon performance. And we realized that we had no way to actually measure with objective evidence what that experience really was. We had no software to help us. So they called Goliath. We were able to get them up and running very quickly, automatically start collecting that data, and they were able to document the actual end user experience. And what they realized is, yes, there were challenges, but not nearly as bad as what the perception was. They benchmarked that experience against industry best practices, so they could talk to the fact that while people were complaining, it's really still the standard of what others are experiencing. And they were able to identify areas to improve. And so what that data provided was a baseline, so they could go put fixed actions in place. And then after the fixed actions that were in place, document, here's how we've been able to improve end user experience. And this was absolutely critical to them because there was some time and investment they were putting in. So they wanted to prove what the impact was for their end users. So let's go ahead and dive into a few of these reports. The first one I want to show is the one that they really started off with, which is our Citrix End User Experience Scorecard. And what this scorecard does is really gives a graphical representation on what's that user experience for your users, leveraging key metrics around ICA round trip time, ICA latency, network latency, and connection speed. So we're going to look at every single user's performance in their sessions. Based on industry best practices, we're going to score that, whether it's experiencing good performance or poor performance, and give you an overall score. And what's great is, unlike other reports, we're not just going to give you a yellow, green, red. We're going to allow you to dig into that and actually identify which users are experiencing poor performance and those that are not. And that's critical. You may have seen other reports that have the red, yellow, and green, but then you actually can't see who's having the problems. So in this example, the investment firm said, we really thought some of our home users had a network issue. And now they can start to see, are those users using certain applications? Do they have a lower ISP? But you can see not everyone is having a negative experience, which is why their overall score is not that poor, even though they have some red marks. Now let's go ahead. Let's say one of the things that they noticed is also logon speeds were slow. So Avi, if you want to get into the next report, here's another report that we provide around session logon, and you can then filter or parse this data based on time period, location, as well as application. In the top section, you can actually see what the benchmark of performance is based on logon stages. So is it that initial initiation? Is it something around GPOs that are causing an impact around logon performance? This allows you really not to just see what's their logon speed, but throughout the cycle, where is it? Then in the bottom left, you can see it broken down by application. So maybe some applications are performing better than others. And then you can see other useful data around what are the session counts by days or hours. Again, a lot of these widgets or sections of data can be configured. This is what you get out of the box. Now the next report, and I'm trying to give you a good purview of different reports we have, really is one that this organization used, because one of the things that they asked was, when everyone went remote, we gave everyone a Citrix license because we didn't know what they needed, how they worked. We didn't want any disruption in productivity. Everyone got a Citrix license. So now it was about 3 months after the pandemic first hit, they went, does everyone really need the license? Are they using it? If they're using it, when are they using it? How are they using Citrix? How long are their sessions? How many sessions do they have a day? How active are they in their sessions? What applications are they using? There's a lot of information around usage that can guide, one, because people are trying to understand how people are working when they're at home, but also trying to go ahead and plan for the future. What does our future Citrix investment look like if we're going to keep our employees working from home? Does everyone need those licenses? So this is just 3 examples of some of the data that this investment firm used in order to benchmark their experience and ultimately take action upon those experiences and make really strategic decisions for their business. So here, as we go through, and I said we're going to leave lots of time for questions, one question we often do get is, if this sounds interesting, how do I go ahead and get started? And so really, in order to get started benchmarking, there's 2 options. The first is you can do it yourself. We'll give you a license to the software. The software automatically discovers and auto deploys. So we're going to go ahead and collect that information, correlate it, interpret it. Again, this is all out of the box. You don't have to be a specialist to go ahead and deploy this technology. And in fact, you don't even have to purchase the software. If you truly just are looking to benchmark and respond to some of those questions, we offer low-cost short-term subscriptions so you can get that point in time measure of end user experience holistically. The other option is we offer benchmarking as a service. We do the entire setup, the entire benchmarking service as a turnkey service for you, and the cost is really dependent upon your size of environment. So little effort on your side to get some of these reports and analytics that you need in order to support the use cases we first talked about, whether it is to prove you're meeting SLAs, maybe it is to actually have a third party come and audit overall IT performance as a department. Don't rely on some subjective end user surveys, which you might not even get results for. Bring objective evidence to the table to talk about that performance. So with that, I do want to thank everyone for joining, and we're going to open up to questions. We got a few questions beforehand. A few have come into the chat, which I love. If you do have any questions, or you're interested in maybe leveraging benchmarking as a service, or interested in that short subscription that we have, please do email techinfo@Goliath Technologies. What I want to stress is this can be very lightweight, where you can have access to this information, not at the individual IT element, but the whole user experience, so that you can go ahead and solve for some of those use cases that you might be experiencing. All right, Avi, let me bring up the questions. So the first question that came in, I think probably earlier on, do I have to buy the product to get these reports? So no, as I just shared, we actually offer a subscription service so that you can go ahead and get access to these maybe for a 3-month period before you're kicking off a project, or maybe you do want to just have a point in time benchmark. So we're very flexible in how you can use our technology to benchmark. The next question is, how do you get the actual data? So we have both agent and agentless technology. So it's not like you're putting an agent on every endpoint that allows us to extract this information. Avi, do you happen to have the, Avi always has all of my slides in the background here. Do you have one of our architecture diagrams? This might be a good time to show. Awesome. Do you mind walking through it, Avi, in terms of how we're getting the data?
Sure. So the way how that we collect the data is, one, you have the Goliath server that's spun up, and then you have the different components that you're looking to monitor. So say, for example, in a Citrix environment, if you're looking to understand the performance of your Zen app servers, we deploy a lightweight intelligent agent onto those machines, then onto some of the infrastructure components, such as your delivery controller, your storefront server. And then we're getting all the deep end user experience metrics, some of which Stacy showed on today's call. Now, say if it's a VMware Horizon environment, as an example, we deploy it onto the VDI server or the RDSH host, and then onto the connection server. And then as far as our integration with the hypervisor layer, that is done agentlessly. And then say if there's any other specific VMs or physical servers that you're interested in monitoring, we deploy lightweight intelligent agents onto those. But something that Stacy did mention that is very important is we do not require to deploy any technology onto the endpoint machines themselves to be able to gather this level of granular detail. And obviously that's important with enterprise organizations. You don't have to push something out to every single endpoint. So.
Awesome. And as I mentioned, if you're not interested in the actual deployment, we can do all of this for you as a service. So multiple options there. Avi, I'm gonna probably pass this one off to you as well. Jerry asks, how do you know if latency is good or bad? And we definitely hear this a lot. It's hard to remember, even if you are an expert, wait, for round trip times, it's this, for network speed, it's that. So Avi, do you want to talk about, when I talk about the fact that we automatically interpret data, there's several different ways we do that. And I think, here we go, Avi, maybe you can go ahead and share that for Jerry.
Yeah, certainly. So as far as understanding when latency is that you see a number, but is that good? Is that bad? There's a number of different areas within the technology that we help direct you to understand, is that latency metric too high? Is it too low? Which would be a good thing if it's too low. So as far as where I'm at right now within the technology is the Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. This pulls up all of your Citrix sessions as an example for your active ones, historical sessions. And so then right off the bat here, you have different color thresholds that can help you identify, are there sessions that are having high ICA latency as an example, or high logon times. In this environment, we can see that everything for the most part is green, recognizing that it's healthy. We can see that this top session does have some high ICA latency at 302 milliseconds, and that is now color-coded orange to recognize, okay, that is not good. That is a high latency metric. You can see here at the bottom that there's a high logon time of 215 seconds, so that one's red. So we do have color coding within the technology to help you easily understand, okay, that one's out of the norm and is a performance issue. Now, you want to understand a bit more as far as why, for example, was there high ICA latency for that user? And where you click on the user and what will populate here is a summary screen that has all the high-level key data points that went into this user Citrix session. So client endpoint machine, receiver version at the endpoint. You have a mini topology view that's going to show you all the components that contributed to this user's Citrix session. Then you have these key performance metrics where you're able to take a look at round trip time, network latency, connection speed. Now, I do want to point out, while it's great that all this information is rolled up onto this first screen, we do have a series of dedicated tabs across the top that give further granular detail. So where the question was, how do we know if an ICA latency metric is high or if it's low? We have these data interpretation lines built throughout the technology. So as I'm hovering over the ICA latency metric at this top left graph, you can see how there's a critical and a caution threshold benchmark line that go across to allow you to easily interpretate, is ICA latency above that critical threshold? And we understand that that user does have very high latency. Or say if it was below the caution point, then it's like, okay, you know what? That user isn't actually having high latency within their session, and really just makes it very easy to quickly take a look at the performance and understand, okay, is it above a certain threshold or below a certain threshold? Hopefully that answered the question.
Awesome. I hope so, from Jerry. We have the next one from Linda and this is a good question. If I do a benchmarking service with Goliath and we find issues, can you also help us troubleshoot those issues for us? So the answer is absolutely yes. So today's webinar was very focused on how we help benchmark. I'd say a very common use case for our technology is also isolating root cause of the issue and helping you resolve those issues. So any parts of that spectrum from benchmarking, troubleshooting to resolution, we can do with a mix of software and even some services. So when I talk about the reports being integrated, what Avi just showed here is very much part of our troubleshooting software solutions that allow you to isolate why someone is having slow performance so that you can resolve them. And the reports are all integrated there so that you can quickly jump back and forth between what the reports are saying and then potentially find root cause. So, good question, Linda. We have from Cortland, do I need to run scripts to get any of this data? So no, right? As Avi showed with the deployment architecture, I talked about our embedded intelligence and automation. We're gonna go ahead and collect all of this information for you. In fact, we have hundreds of monitors that are looking at every IT element, collecting that information. And yes, we can report on it, but we can also alert on any event, condition, or failure point that could impact user experience so you can take action. So we're not just reporting on that information, we can also alert on it with all of that embedded intelligence. When it comes to scripting, we do know many IT pros like to script and in fact have a number of scripts they've built. So if you do have scripts that you want to use, our product is extensible and you absolutely can go ahead and leverage them in the technology. In fact, we've got a lot of people that have built in their own scripting engines to help collect and interpret data as well, just not a requirement. From Madeline, you highlighted that you can get data for different stages of the logon process. What stages are you referencing? Right as Avi got out of the demo. So good question, Madeline. Madeline, do you, or Avi, maybe the best way to bring this up is again in the session display. So here, as Avi said, this is the session display for an individual user session. So all of the data you're seeing here, and I'll let him talk through it, you can also report on, and you would see in a graph or a chart or a report like I showed logon performance. Avi, you want to drill into what we mean by the different logon stages?
Sure. With some of the tools that are out there, you're going to get 6 to 8 different stages of the logon process. We're going to give you over 30 different stages. And typically when I'm investigating a logon duration issue or just want to understand the duration of each particular stage, where I go within the technology is under the logon duration tab. The page is broken down into a couple different sections. One, you can see if it was, at the top, was it a reconnect or an initial session? The total logon time. Then you're going to have what's happening at the brokering stages. So it's happening at the delivery controller at the top left here, where you have information on drive mapping, logon script execution, profile load, all with the duration of each stage and a Gantt chart to quickly draw your attention to where was the longest contributing factor to the logon. Then at the top right, you have what's happening at Citrix receiver. And again, this is without deploying any technology to the endpoint machine itself. We're able to see things such as ICA file download, session creation with that same duration, and Gantt chart. Then at the bottom, you're able to see the logon stage details from the session host. So client and server validation, authentication, we can drill into that and show you the OUs that that user was a part of, the domain control that authenticated the user. Then for group policies, we'll show you each group policy down to the policy name and how long each one took to execute, so that you can quickly pinpoint if there is a particular group policy that was, maybe a dry mapping policy was incorrectly mapped and adding over 40 seconds to a logon time. Being able to easily see that, know where you need to focus your attention into resolving a long logon time. In fact, clients have been able to cut down on logon times by over 80% because of this level of granular detail.
Awesome. Thanks, Avi. And again, this is another great way where you can benchmark performance, because what does it mean around logon time? Is it that initial logon, or is it some of these different component parts of authentication, GPOs? So being able to not only break it down per user, but report on that, especially by like location or application, by user group. There's a lot of value in parsing that information out. Next question comes from Brad. Do you support Citrix Cloud? So yes, any of the benchmarking reports that we showed today is all supported on Citrix Cloud. We also have a Citrix Cloud connector module that actually monitors the health of both Citrix Cloud and the cloud connectors. So we can automatically alert you if there's an issue, automatically remediate that issue, and then report on all the experience that's going on. This one comes from Jocelyn. She asks, how are reports shared? So there's a number of ways to share this information out. I think when Avi was probably in there, Avi, if you want to bring up the reporting screen, you can do it absolutely from this screen. So you can schedule it to be emailed out. You can export the data in Excel or CSV file format. You can integrate with third-party tools. Maybe you want to kick it off with send it to ServiceNow or a Slack group. You can also integrate it with more visualization like a Power BI or Tableau. So there's lots of ways that you can go ahead and share this information, display it. Maybe, Avi, you want to walk through a little bit about how the reports work here?
Sure. As far as with any of the reports, you can see all the ones that are already having been run in the environment, but to specify how you can, export it out or just have the technology store it. One, you can always view a report just by clicking on it right from the console here. You can view all of that particular report, the previous times that it was run, and be able to view a historical report. Then for creating a new one, where you can be able to select any of the different report types that you want, select which metrics that you want included, select the portions of the environment that you want. And where that's helpful is, say if you have a particular business line manager, maybe the HR department or accounting department, where they just want details on their particular users, you can segment the reports based off of just that. And then here's where you decide how you want this information, shared, whether it's sent out via an email, PDF, CSV, have it be exported out. And you can always have these reports run on a on-demand basis. You can run them weekly, daily, monthly. So say if a particular business line manager wants a report in their inbox every Monday at 8 a.m. for the previous week's worth of data, it's very easy to configure that.
Great. Aaron asks, has anyone ever used your reports to identify if employees are working or not? So, Avi, if you want to go up, so the answer is yes. One of these reports, I think it's 2 slides above this that I showed, we do have a report that we do label our end user productivity report. And when the pandemic hit, we did have a number of customers that came to us and frankly said, we want to know if our employees are working while they're at home. And I think there's different ways to use this data, right? But that is a question we've gotten. And the way people were using this information, the way we outline it is about how they're using it, when they're using it. But if you look at some of these specific metrics, it's really in calling out productivity levels. So for each user, you're going to see the session, when they opened it, when they closed it. You're going to see how long that session was. Then you're going to see the amount of time of interaction. So how interactive were they? They were moving their mouse, they were typing, and how much time were they inactive? And we actually got this directly from one of our clients' feedbacks where they said, there is times when people are going to be inactive. They go to get a cup of coffee, they take a lunch break. What I really want to know is someone inactive for hours at a time. So we created this inactivity maps, which you can go ahead and sort by, and you can quickly identify, right? Maybe someone was inactive for 30 minutes, they took a phone call, but if someone's been inactive for hours, there is a good chance that they were potentially not working. It's interesting you asked that question because one of our first customers to use this report, that was the question they asked. But quickly it got flipped around where their HR department went, now I'm not worried if people are working, I'm actually worried they're working too much, because what they found out is people were logging in earlier, they were staying online longer, and they were really worried about burnout. So they put some HR policies in place and really did some conversations with people around how do you want to carry out your day now that you're working from home for the first time. So it drove a lot of interesting conversations as well. One last question. So if anyone else has another question, please go ahead and submit in the Q&A or chat box. This one comes from Sid and said, do you offer free trials? So the answer is yes. We do offer free trials of our software. Typically they're 30 days. I will say again, if you're looking to benchmark, probably the most effective thing is to look at a short-term subscription offering. And the reason I say that is you're happy to use this for 30 days, but if you're looking to benchmark, you probably want more than 30 days of data. I know, Avi, you have this question with clients all the time. We can show you what you're going to get, but to truly get the overall experience, and if you're looking to baseline over time periods, you probably do want to have something at least for a 6-month period of time. All right. Well, those were all great questions. Like I said, I always enjoy them. I want to thank all of you for attending today. Avi, as always, thank you for being our technical guide here and bringing up the software and showcasing it. There is a short survey at the end. Please take the 2 minutes that it would take to fill out the survey. Based on your feedback, we're able to go ahead and continually improve the content that we're providing you, as well as tailor any follow-up we have. So again, thanks to all of you. Thanks, Avi, and I hope everyone has a safe and great rest of their day. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.